Military patrols coming to Chicago. When? How many? That's all TBD. Here is the key. President Trump says his power to militarizing policing, limitless. It's September, and that means we have to crank up the shutdown clock again. House Budget Committee Republican Tim Moore gives us his shutdown odds. Americans captured overseas and held for ransom. Not money, but bad guys in U.S. custody. Our look at a new book on prisoner swaps and the nasty negotiations behind them. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. It's great to be back, and yes, I missed you while I was gone. Fear of crime is visceral, always has been, always will be. It is, therefore, a permanent political issue. Emotions around it coiled and sometimes crude. And by that I mean anecdotes and images in our mind understandably carry greater weight than statistics or trend lines. President Trump has thrown the National Guard and federal law enforcement at crime here in Washington, D.C. Lots of arrests have been made, even though records show only a slight numerical increase in the number of arrests over the arrests that police in D.C. were making before the armored vehicles arrived and federal dragnets commenced. Our review of charging documents and similar reviews conducted by the New York Times reveal arrests for some serious crimes. That's very much true. But many more arrests for traffic offenses, drinking liquor in public, or carrying a firearm without the proper D.C. permit. In fact, fewer than 10% of the cases involving federal agents, according to the New York Times, were for violent crimes or for property crimes. Yet the potency of hyping a crime wave and double hyping its sudden absence is, well, undeniable. The White House craves a clash with Democrats over fighting crime. The president said this afternoon other presidents never did what he's done or contemplates doing, militarizing policing in many parts of our country. He said D.C. was a test and that military deployments will come to Chicago and quite probably Baltimore and may return to Los Angeles, vociferous local objections notwithstanding. The president said he had limitless rights to impose order. What this means to the notion that cities and states have their own rights, their own jurisdiction, their own political legitimacy is anyone's guess. To be clear, federal crime task forces have worked with local police in our country for decades to fight crime. This is not that. This is a president deciding, as no president before has, where crime is bad, what constitutes a crime crisis, and then imposing a military crackdown for a duration of his own choosing. It leaves details like the kind of cases brought or the cost-benefit of having the feds chase open container violations or those who run red lights. Well, those details are left for those people who compose footnotes that can be found inside, many years later, moldering history books. The president did make some other news today on the Space Force, tariffs, and a few other matters. For that, we turn to Nancy Cordes, as we so often do, with confidence at the White House. Nancy, great to see you this Monday afternoon. The president did talk about Space Force, tariffs, and crime nationally. Give us your summary.
Well, after hinting for weeks, Major, that he was going to do something like this, President Trump said today, point blank for the first time, that he does plan to send National Guard troops to the Windy City, that it is not a matter of if, but when. He didn't say when, but he seemed pretty determined to do it despite the vociferous opposition that has been voiced by Chicago's mayor and by Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. President Trump said he hopes that Pritzker will call him and ask him to send more federal aid. And the president rattled off crime statistics from Chicago from just this long weekend. But he said whether Pritzker comes around on this issue or not, he feels that he has the right and the authority to do it. And so he plans to send National Guard troops into Chicago, despite a ruling from a federal district judge just today that said that the president overstepped his authority, violated federal law when he sent National Guard troops into Los Angeles a few months ago.
And the president also said that the administration would, on an expedited basis, seek Supreme Court review of an appeals court ruling that came down late last week, nullifying many, not all, but many of the tariffs the administration has set in motion.
Right, and the White House is using fairly apocalyptic language to describe what would happen if the president's tariffs were to be blocked long-term in any way. The president has said that it would destroy the economy and that it would be terrible not just for the U.S. but for the global commerce. So the White House really leaning in to this fight, even as we watch these tariffs wend their way through the federal courts, which is causing some unease not only for U.S. businesses but for really businesses around the world who are trying to figure out how exactly this is going to affect them in the months to come.
Nancy Cordes at the White House, thank you so very, very much. CBS News Justice Department reporter Jake Rosen joins me now here at the family table. Jake, great to see you. Let's talk about what the president said today, the plans for Chicago. What, if anything, do we know about what those plans actually are?
As it stands right now, Major, our colleagues reported last week in the Immigration and Justice Department here at CBS that there is going to be increased federal immigration authorities present in Chicago starting this week and kicking up throughout. But again, as this is just the kicking off point of what they're going to do, what we saw and have continued to see in Los Angeles, what we've seen creep into Washington, D.C. after the federal takeover started. But what this opens the door for is the National Guard to potentially be called in, because we saw this in Los Angeles and we kind of have seen the reverse in Washington, D.C. But as immigration authorities have come in, protests come in. As protests come in, there are potential bad actors who, as we saw in Los Angeles, the easiest example was throwing bricks through truck windows. Damaged, easily hurts somebody driving. Officers who do not deserve to be hurt in their line of work were hurt. Then that creates an emergency in the eyes of the White House. They are then given the opportunity to not just have these troops protect federal buildings, but then they are creeping into the mission, protecting the trucks that potentially are in, walking alongside. And that is what this judge in San Francisco ruled was wrong and illegal that the Trump administration did today.
I want to play some sound from Face the Nation yesterday. My colleague Ed O'Keefe, who did a wonderful job sitting in for me for a couple of days, talked to J.B. Pritzker, Illinois governor, Democrat, and Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security. Let's play those control room back to back, please.
Notice he never talks about where the most violent crime is occurring, which is in red states. Illinois is not even in the bottom half of states.
This seems like it's more about Governor Pritzker's ego now rather than actually protecting his people. If he has one murder in the city of Chicago, he should be calling President Trump and saying, what's your ideas? What can we do?
One murder. If that's the definition of this White House of a crime crisis, it is going to be sending, or believes it will have the authority to send federal law enforcement and possibly National Guard anywhere in this country.
Absolutely. And I think we should put what both Governor Pritzker and Noem said very briefly just into context, is that of cities with over 100,000 people in them, Chicago actually ranks 80th in terms of crime. Again, violent crime per 100,000 people. But again, at the same time, the other cities that the president has actually talked about, Oakland, so San Francisco, again, not off the table, Baltimore, Cleveland, Memphis, all cities who rank in the top 5. There hasn't been this same talk. Well, it's because J.B. Pritzker has been extremely vocal. I don't think it's a coincidence. We've seen the mayor of Baltimore be extremely vocal in his pushing back, the mayor of Baltimore pushing back, and obviously Gavin Newsom, President Trump's public enemy number one, really targeting this and drawing that attention on himself.
It's a continuing story, and Jake, we're going to turn to you many, many times on it. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Congress comes back from a long summer break, and it's got a big to-do list. Among the key items, a funding deadline to keep the government open. And if you don't do that, well, there's a shutdown and the time clock and all that. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins me now from Capitol Hill for the saga that simply never ends. Caitlin, great to see you. Thanks so much for filling in while I was gone in California, having a very nice time running on the beach and doing other odd things. We won't get into that, but I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're with us. I'm not going to ask you to describe the odds. We'll have a member of Congress do that momentarily. But just a general to-do list for Congress and where government funding will fit within all of that.
Hey, Major, it is great to have you back. I can attest that you have very large shoes under that desk, so it was an honor to be there. Glad you got some well-deserved time off. It feels like the first day of school up here, Major. All the lawmakers coming back, and they have actually a lot of homework to do. That government shutdown deadline is in fact looming. It's first day of school. Also feels very much like Groundhog Day, because this is a scenario in which Congress continually puts itself in. They are supposed to pass a dozen appropriations bills every year. They rarely ever do that. They passed a couple this Congress, and they have many more to go. That's not going to happen by the end of this month, spoiler alert. So they have to find a temporary stopgap measure, as they often do, and that's what we're looking at here. Now, Republicans control the House and the Senate, but they do so with a very slim margin. So on the Senate side, they're really going to need Democrats, 7 of them, to pass any sort of government funding bill. And as we've talked about before, Democrats are in the minority trying to figure out what to do. They want to use any leverage point that they think they have, and this is one of them. But as we remember from just a few months ago, because again, we were in this situation just a few months ago, Democrats ended up caving, as some of their supporters put it, to Republicans voting to not shut down the government over trying to, stretch this out. So, Major, I think this could come down to a staring contest, and see who blinks first.
And there's other issues before Congress, the Epstein files, and there's a deadline, 30 days, for how long the president has to, in its own way, federalize the D.C. crime control situation. Congress will have to deal with that one way or the other.
That's right. These 2 big items. I mean, Republican leaders had hoped that the fervor over the Epstein files would die down while Congress was away on recess. That hasn't happened, thanks to a lot of Democrats who are trying to put this forward, but also a Republican, Thomas Massie, working with Ro Khanna to file or to work towards gathering enough signatures for a discharge position to force Speaker Johnson's hand to put a measure on the floor. They are working on that. As you mentioned, the president was able to go it alone, deploying these National Guard troops, but now if he wants to extend that deadline, he'll need support from Congress. Could pass the House. There are no Senate Democrats that are going to support that.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, always a pleasure. Thank you so very, very much. Still to come, we're back on Capitol Hill with Budget Committee member Congressman Tim Moore. Plus, the new push from lawmakers fresh back to Capitol Hill to release all of the Epstein files. And Kim Jong-un joins Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. This Far East show of force is being viewed somewhat with alarm in Washington and quite possibly elsewhere. The Takeout, I'm happy to say, returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. Lawmakers returning to Capitol Hill today are taking on a lengthy, and we mentioned this a moment ago, lengthy to-do list, including, if they can, avert a government shutdown. It's partial. It's not the whole thing. Joining me now from Capitol Hill, North Carolina Republican Congressman Tim Moore. Tim, I haven't met you before. It's good to meet you. He's a member in good standing, I'm told, of the Budget Committee and the House Committee on Financial Services. Great to have you, sir. Thanks for joining us. I want to play you sound from my interview with Speaker Mike Johnson on July 24th. Control room, play that. Will there be a shutdown in September?
Not if I have anything to say about it. We have no interest in a shutdown. I'm interested. I heard or read today that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries were meeting and gaming it out. They've weaponized shutdowns for political purposes. It seems that that's what they would like to do. We want to do our work, and we're pushing the appropriations through the process.
Well, since the Speaker name-checked Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, let's play sound for him, not from 24th of July, but from very recently, like today, just a few hours ago. Let's listen.
We're not going to find ourselves in a situation where Republicans at the 11th hour present a partisan spending bill that hurts everyday Americans, hurts children, hurts veterans, hurts seniors, and hurts the very people who this government should be helping. And then Republicans expect that we are just going to fall in line like they do all the time to Donald Trump's extreme agenda. That's not happening.
So, Congressman, evaluate what you just heard from the Speaker and from the Minority Leader.
Well, look, the Speaker said it exactly correctly. The Democrats have simply issued some ridiculous ultimatums, trying to just take issue with President Trump and a lot of the great policies that he's doing, and you want him to weaponize and use a government shutdown. That is absolutely irresponsible to shut down this government. The American citizens count on that. The people demand it, that we keep the government going, and we're going to get that done. I mean, the House has already passed 2 of the 12 appropriations bills. The others are on track right now. And we passed the one big, beautiful bill that cut taxes, allowed energy exploration, funded the border, funded the military. I mean, a lot of great things are happening. I wish, I'm new here. I've only been here a few months. I came from a situation in state government where, we could work with Democrats. And I'm disappointed a lot of our Democrats, aren't working with us on it. But I talk to a lot of them, particularly a lot of the new ones, and a lot of them tell me they want to vote with us, but their leadership won't let them. But the Democrats weaponizing a government shutdown, that is just simply not right. We can't let that happen.
Congressman Moore, I'm a very old person. I was covering Congress in the early 1990s when it was a point of pride for appropriators of both parties to not pass 2 of 12 in September, but to have all 12 passed by September. I know 2 is better than 0, but it's still not very far along the line. There's still plenty of work the House has to do and plenty of work the Senate has to do to be in the process to avoid a shutdown. It hasn't done its work sufficiently. That's a fact, right?
So, of course, the passage of the one big, beautiful bill was huge with what it did to really rein in a lot of wasteful spending to make sure that we passed the tax cuts to keep that going. But we do need to get moving on with the appropriation process, but it is working through. But it's just, there's been a lot of challenges. There's been, and it's very unfortunate, so little bipartisanship. And I got to put, the blame mainly on the other side there of trying to come together and work on things. And I think what it is, Major, is just so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so fixated on President Trump and wanting to make him look bad, they just can't bring themselves to sit down at the table and try to work on a budget. And at the end of the day, the House, we can pass everything we want to. We've got to get it passed in the Senate. And with the filibuster rule, that takes you to 60 votes unless you can get something bipartisan. So there has to be something done there. But what bothers me is when I hear folks on the other side of the aisle, when I hear Democrats almost celebrating the possibility of shutting down the federal government, that's malpractice. We just cannot do that. And the American people expect better.
Congressman Moore, it is expected that the Epstein matter will be a legislative irritant, putting it mildly, the next couple of weeks. So do you believe, A, it's going to be a legislative irritant, meaning getting in the way of things, and are you on board the discharge petition put forward in the House just today by Tom Massey and Ro Khanna?
I think the way that Congressman Massey is going about this is wrong. But at the same time, I think they'll just put all the records out there. Just put it out there. I mean, I've got no interest in seeing that creep protected. I mean, he was, what he did to people, what he worked on. I don't, Epstein, the world's better off this guy's not here. But if there were people who associated with it, put it out there. But my understanding is that the Justice Department has actually gone through the process of seeking to release records. But because of the nature where it is in the court system, the courts have authority to be able to freeze that up. So I'm told that even what, Congressman Massey's talking about doing doesn't pass muster, that ultimately because it was grand jury and so many things, there's a lot of safeguards and procedural things that have to be dealt with by the courts. But I'm one of those people like, hey, put it out there.
Well, just to be clear, that's grand jury testimony. What the Massey resolution is about files in the possession of the Justice Department, not grand jury testimony. You want that to come out, is that correct?
Listen, whatever they can release, put it out there.
Very good.
But I will say this, I think that I do think what Massey's doing is the wrong approach, trying this discharge petition. That's not how you do things.
Very good. Congressman Moore, I hope you come back to the show. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, it's been great.
U.S. rivals lining up on the same side as the leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea gather for a summit and a World War II victory parade, the show of force and how it's being received here, meaning in Washington and around the world. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un arrived in Beijing to attend a military parade, that's putting it mildly, with Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The procession, and it will have a lot of brand new Chinese military hardware, it's tomorrow, will mark 80 years since Japan's surrender in World War II. There's kind of a revisionist history that China is imposing over this event. And over the past few days, Xi Jinping has been kind of reaffirming ties with Putin and Russia and trying to find new ties, if they're available, with leaders like Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy, Ravi Agrawal, joins me now. Ravi's a friend of the show. Ravi, always great to see you. This has already been a kind of spectacle in Tianjin with Putin and Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi. It's going to be even more of a global spectacle with this procession and Kim Jong-un's arrival. What do you think the globe is making of this? And are these attachments meaningful for the Trump administration foreign policy?
So I think a lot of this has to do with symbolism, with imagery. And I think Xi Jinping is very clear in his mind that, on the one hand, the world is seeing an image of Trump as a bully, of Trump as taking the United States in a direction where it is upending the world order that it helped create. And China, on the other hand, as a more reliable, responsible player that is also able to host these summits and bring countries together in a way that you would have imagined the United States would. So I think that that is very much the imagery that the world is seeing. But all of that said, as much as there are some things that are bringing these countries together, we shouldn't overstate what unites them. There's just as much that divides them as unites them, Major.
What's on the dividing side of this that we should pay close attention to, Ravi?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, for example, India and China. Narendra Modi, who you mentioned, hadn't been to China in 7 years. And that's because India and China have had a dispute along their border for the last 5 or 6 years that has been deadly at times. And that has created all kinds of tensions between the two sides where they didn't even have direct flights until a few months ago. So that is one example of tensions between these countries. And look, there are going to be occasions where it is in their interest to appear as if they are part of an anti-American front or a front that does not believe in democracy. But again, there's a lot that divides them. India is the world's largest democracy. It is not a North Korea or a Russia or a China.
And Ravi, when Russia invaded Ukraine, India sat it out diplomatically, much to the consternation of Americans in Congress and elsewhere who had invested all this time and energy for decades trying to make the United States and India closer, more aligned. And India's passivity on that drove them kind of nutty. China has aligned itself with Russia in Ukraine. How much is Ukraine a backdrop for this particular encounter?
Not as much, actually. I think in China's case, China has been quite clear that it doesn't want Russia to lose, number one. Number two, it has helped Russia in the form of semiconductors and drones and various technologies to actually actively help it win. So has Iran, so has North Korea, all countries that were part of these meetings. India is quite different. India, like many other South Asian, Southeast Asian countries and African countries, has said that, it would be nice to have peace. We kind of see what's going on. We don't like it, but we're not supporting either side. And that would be India's take. It hasn't really thrown its weight behind Russia. Yes, it's bought Russian crude, but India's point has always been it will buy the cheapest crude wherever it can find it. And to be frank, the Biden administration was okay with that. Remember, if India didn't buy Russian crude, it would buy it from somewhere else. And that, of course, would cause all kinds of problems here with inflation.
Ravi, very quickly, I mentioned this parade. It's not just a regular parade. Xi Jinping wants to show the world that China is not just an economic power. It is a serious, advanced, technologically adept military power. How much should we pay attention to that aspect of this?
A fair bit. They're going to show off their might, the numbers, the new technology. A lot of that symbolism is going to be important to the Chinese people. Remember, the audiences in each of these cases are also domestic for all the leaders who are there. That's important. But one other thing to look out for is that this is all marking 80 years since the end of World War II, and China's revisionist history version of this, it played a much bigger role than the West believes it did. And that, too, is another part of this for for China and for Russia in its own way to say, look, we're not only important historical players, we're going to be big players in the future as well.
Editor-in-Chief of Foreign Policy, Ravi Agrawal. Always a pleasure, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The new leaf trend continues. One of Congress's longest-serving members says he's not seeking re-election. The announcement from Jerry Nadler as the Democratic Party looks, it says, to a new generation. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. New York Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler and Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst, the latest members to join a kind of enlarging caucus on Capitol Hill, the throw in the towel caucus. They're just not hanging around here anymore. They're not running for re-election. Talked about this and many other things in the matter of politics. Joining me now, former Republican senior congressional aide, Rina Shah, friend of the show. Vedant Patel, also a friend of the show, served as a spokesperson for the State Department during the Biden administration. Look, they're all friends of the show. Congressional correspondent for 24 Site News, Julie Grace Brufke. I want to play for you sound. We had on the show about 2 weeks ago, if memory serves, Liam Elkind running against Jerry Nadler. And I asked him, what's wrong with Jerry Nadler? Let's listen.
I grew up voting for him. I have great respect for his career. At the same time, we're in a different moment now. Housing is more expensive. Healthcare is more expensive. We need leaders who can meet this moment. And the Democratic Party desperately needs to build a bridge to the next generation. And if they aren't going to build that bridge, we're going to start building it ourselves.
Jerry Nadler now agrees. Give me your sense of that.
Well, look, I think first, to take a step back, this is certainly the end of an era for New York. Congressman Nadler has helped this country navigate through some very testy waters, including impeachment hearings. But I think this is something that we're going to see across congressional districts around the country. People are going to need to make choices whether they can weather the storm when it comes to re-election. There's primary challengers popping up every day in states big and small and congressional districts big and small. And it seems like Congressman Nadler made a calculus.
And Julie Grace, this also played out in Texas, which after the new maps were drawn, it looked for a while that Lloyd Doggett was going to stay in and a senior ranking member of the House Democratic Caucus. And then he looked at it and said, no, I'm not going to challenge that younger Democrat. I'm going to opt out. So this older generation of Democrats who for a while was standing on the proposition, well, experience matters, knowledge matters, long-term constituent service matters. In the end, they're backing away.
Now, I've talked to a lot of younger Democrats that have they want different messaging, and they felt like, we kind of saw it with the Democratic leadership elections last time around on kind of a push for a new generational change. So I feel like it's not totally surprising. And I know that speaking to some other Democrats, that Jerry Nadler had some health issues. So I think that also was probably a factor there. But definitely the end of an era there. And I think we'll probably see more of that generational change continue to churn as some of these, especially with some of these maps being redrawn.
And Rina, is the shorthand of all this, if you can TikTok, you can stay. If you can't, you got to go?
Oh, I wouldn't reduce it to that. I mean, look, Jerry Nadler's been a titan for New York, 34 years, fighting for civil rights, securing funding for 9/11 recovery. I think he just realized it's time for fresh voices and time to pass on the torch to those progressive voices that he sees in New York. And also, I really love that call for generational change he made. It's bold, and it's not just about stepping aside. It is about trusting younger leadership to tackle the challenges that Trump is bringing directly to the doorstep in New York. And also, I think his retirement really signals some hope, actually, for the Democratic Party. In essence, it's what we're going to see, and I don't know that it's going to change anytime between now and when the race takes place. It's going to be a fierce race. It's going to be a crowded primary, I believe, because his legacy of grit and principle has really set a high bar. There are a lot of people who think they can meet that.
We are not going to chew the shutdown dog bone for the entire remaining time we have together, which is about 4 minutes. But I want to get your 30-second sense of what the political calculus is for Democrats in this particular month.
I think it's twofold. First, obviously, we want to see Democrats fight to restore some of the funding cuts that have been going back and forth in these talks, whether it be Medicaid, rural hospital funding. But I think an important thing to remember is there's an election in Virginia in fall where there are a lot of federal
and New
workers,
Jersey,
or there are a lot of federal workers, a lot of public employees who are going to be hurt on the front lines if there's a federal shutdown. So we've got to fight.
That's going to be a proxy election for
Absolutely.
This conversation, no doubt. Julie Grace, your 30 seconds on shutdown dynamics.
So it sounds like Tom Cole's kind of pushing for a stopgap
House Republican
till November.
Appropriations
Yeah,
Chair.
and it seems like Rosa DeLauro expressed some openness to that.
Ranking Democrat on
but
approach.
I mean, I talked to some Democrat leadership staffers earlier today that said they're not going to rubber stamp something if Republicans tack anything onto a stopgap. So they're upset about the changes to Medicaid and reconciliation. So if there's anything they can kind of leverage on that front in a CR, that's kind of on the table on that front.
Rena?
It's deja vu. You know, you've got lawmakers
All over again.
who are playing chicken with our economy here. And it's not like a shutdown just hurts federal workers. They hit small businesses too, these shutdowns. And even a looming shutdown can do that. I think federal workers, small businesses, you name it, I think we need to get a deal done without the drama. And I trust Speaker Johnson to try to take the ball there. But this deadline, more than anything else, it's a test. It's a test of whether Congress can put people over politics. And I know that happens every time, but I'm not holding my breath on this one, except for just saying that I believe common sense can prevail.
There's a new poll that shows Cuomo ahead of Mamdani in the New York mayor's race. Do you believe it?
Well, I think the caveat there is if everyone else drops out, which is a really important if, because it doesn't seem like anybody else is going to. It's a super big if. It's a super big if. So it's sort of like, I would love to go to the moon, but it all remains to be seen. I think you saw Governor Cuomo and Mayor Adams.
Right. The stipulation was that was head to head.
Sure, certainly they played a little bit of a game of chicken this summer of who's going to drop out, who's going to not. I think it remains to be seen if anybody's going to actually do that, and if the field remains as crowded as it currently is, I think this poll is, it's just a poll.
Rena Patel, you get the last word. Rena Shaw, Julie Grace Buckley, always a great pleasure to have you here at the family table. Thank you. Despite President Trump's efforts to downplay it all, the House is back. And that means so is the Jeffrey Epstein saga and everything related to it. A big news conference set for tomorrow. We're going to preview that next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Epstein survivors were on Capitol Hill today pushing for the passage of legislation that would require the release of Justice Department materials and other materials related to the Epstein investigation. They held meetings and interviews with members of the House Oversight Committee and with Speaker Mike Johnson ahead of a pretty important news conference set for tomorrow.
We're sincere about this. This was a 2.5-hour discussion. It was as bipartisan as anything I've seen in the 9 years I've been here.
We want to bring justice to every single person who was involved in the Epstein evils of the cover-up thereof, but we also want to be equally certain that we protect the innocent victims.
Scott McFarland joins me now here at the family table. Scott, I want to play for you sound from Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, who with Thomas Massie tomorrow will hold a press conference talking about what is known as a discharge petition. That's a means by which members of the House can go around the leadership and put something on the floor, even though the leadership and the Rules Committee doesn't want it to be there. Let's listen to Ro Khanna talking about this press conference tomorrow and the overall Epstein matter.
What will be explosive is the September 3rd press conference that both of us are having with 10 Epstein victims, many who have never spoken out before. They're going to be on the steps of the Capitol. They will be telling their story, and they will be saying clearly to the American public that they want the release of the Epstein files for full closure on this matter.
Release the files, but also the victims want, if there are other individuals implicated criminally, to have the Justice Department follow up, which is something we remember in the two-page memo the Justice Department said there was no need for. That's part of what this conversation is about.
According to the people who were in the meeting today, it was, as you'd expect, emotional. You talk to Epstein survivors, it's going to be emotional. It was a horror that they experienced. It's a horror they still suffer with. But what's the takeaway? What is the end goal? Well, it's different for different people here. Not any one thing is wanted by everybody. You have Epstein survivors who want justice against everybody who may have played a role in their victimization, but they also want transparency. They also want to be heard. They are also concerned that this new lionization of Ghislaine Maxwell is triggering not just to them, but to other sex abuse victims across the country. So there's a multitude of concerns. And for the politicians, well, there's a whole series of different interests there, aren't there? I mean, you've got a bipartisan group trying to find an end run around getting this thing passed into law, but perhaps Democrats and Republicans have different motives on this.
Different motives for sure. Do we have a sense of what the Justice Department has given the House Oversight Committee and how much of that, quite separate from whether this discharge petition succeeds, will ever be in the public view.
The House Oversight Committee members who've spoken to this say that there is information in what they've been receiving from the Department of Justice that will require some level of redaction, which means there could be some case-sensitive information or some personally identifying information in there that they've got to wipe out so that it doesn't go public against the wishes of the victims, indicating there could be some meat there we haven't seen on the bones already. But you've seen a whole series of things now that the Department of Justice has done trying to get past this call of transparency in the Epstein matter, giving information to the House committee, asking for a grand jury transcript to be unsealed. That was rejected. Giving Ghislaine Maxwell an audience with the Deputy U.S. Attorney General, transferring Ghislaine Maxwell to a different federal prison. None of it seems to be ending the fury here.
Not ending the fury, and certainly the president could foreclose rhetorically commutation or pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell. Hasn't done that. That has added fuel to this fire. Scott McFarlane, as always, thank you so very much. Vladimir Putin's secret agents and his strategy behind taking Americans hostage. Next, my conversation with the authors of Swap, a secret history of the new Cold War. You are watching The Takeout. Welcome back. A new book looks at the intense intelligence fight between Russia and the United States, which has led to what the book calls a, quote, ruthless game of hostage taking. Earlier, I spoke to Drew Hinshaw and Joe Parkinson, the authors of Swap, a secret history of the new Cold War. Let's listen. I love to ask reporters who've written books this question. What's your favorite nugget of reporting in the book? There's many to choose from. I will let the audience know that.
Where to start? I think if you're a fan of real-life spy thrillers, which I always have been, and growing up I've always read John le Carré, Ian Fleming, and the authors that follow them, finding out the thing that's the most important to Vladimir Putin, the kind of asset, the kind of spy that's the most important to him, which is the illegals, the deep, deep cover spies who spend so many years building their cover that in some cases their own children don't know their identity.
Here in America.
Here in America, we all saw the Americans.
Yes.
This is the real life Americans for sure, but all over Europe as well. Putin has expanded this program, and we were able to, through reporting in Argentina, Mexico, Greece, Austria, track how these individuals spent decades building completely different lives to ultimately blend into the middle of Europe in a free access zone, Schengen, to be mobilized in preparation for the war in Ukraine. And of course, this couple who are on the cover of this book here, these two Russian spies who claim to be Argentines and their children, were just 4 of the individuals of the 26 who were swapped last year in that epic East-West prisoner swap.
Drew, your favorite nugget?
What surprised me about writing this book is you think that foreign policy is driven by, people sitting in State Department cubicles or the White House or the Situation Room. But this is the story of ordinary Americans who've been thrown into Russian jails and left to rot. And what is surprising about this world is the role that their mothers, their sisters play to liberate them, to push their government, to go up to bat against the Russian government. We're talking about ordinary Americans. One of the main characters in our book is a portrait painter in Massachusetts whose brother, Paul Whelan, was thrown into jail, and her name's Elizabeth. And she had to do, for nearly 6 years, constant battle against her own government and the Russian government to get her brother home. And that is thankless work, but it resulted in what is, I think, the subject of our book, which is this massive prisoner swap you saw last year.
I want to tell my audience something. I try to read all the books, but I don't get to all the books. So when I can't get to the entire book, I go through a process, which is I will open it up to a random page and see if the page works. I did that 14 times in the hour and a half I had to prepare for this interview. 14 different pages, randomly selected, just to see if there's something on the page that grabs me. All 14 pages worked. Everything works in this. This reads like a thriller. This reads like a novel, but it is journalistic, repertorial throughout. Ann Applebaum, who's a well-known and well-traveled journalist, writes in a blurb on the front page, "This is essential reading for an era when authoritarians barter in human lives." Is that the essence of this tale?
That's right. This is ancient. The pattern of grabbing someone and holding them to ransom is something that's happened since antiquity. And 20 years ago, this is something terrorist groups do. It's now something that governments do. China has done it. Russia has done it. North Korea has done it. We call it hostage diplomacy, and it's becoming a global challenge for the U.S.
And for Russia, it almost seems like state policy under Putin.
I would say so. I think Putin has definitely been the pioneer and the principal practitioner of hostage diplomacy. And you can see the expansion of it all the way up to more and more high-profile targets. We all remember Brittany Griner, the WNBA star, Evan Gershkovich, our friend and colleague who was taken. Putin has ratcheted up this policy, but what a lot of people don't realize, and we reveal in the book, is that he actually started this 2 weeks into his presidency. An American named Edmund Pope, whose case is nowhere near as well known, was arrested clearly on spurious charges by the FSB. And people may forget that Putin was not only a KGB officer, but he was chairman of the FSB before he became president. Edmund Pope ultimately ended up being freed because Bill Clinton had to call Vladimir Putin at that time. The US had more leverage and there was less of an antagonistic relationship between the countries. But that was really a very early harbinger of what was to come. And Putin, as we know, maybe there's no such thing as an ex-KGB officer, but the power of the security forces in Russia now, they're the nobility, they run the country, and they're very much behind this program of taking and seizing Americans that they believe that they can trade for political leverage.
And Brittany Griner fit into that category distinctly. And going back to Elizabeth Whelan, the book goes into great detail about how there is a comparative difference when someone of fame is taken by the Russians and someone of comparative less fame, and how much more difficult it is for the families of those who are less well known to keep their family member's name in the conversation at the highest levels of the U.S. government.
That's right. Something that happened in...
Brittany Griner had advocates like this.
Exactly. Straight away.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course she does.
But then you had kind of ordinary Marines, veterans, who the Russians thought would resonate in America, but didn't. There was Trevor Reed, a Marine who was arrested on a kind of bogus charge of assaulting a police officer. There was Paul Whelan. There's a Marine there right now, Robert Gilman, who's still in Russia. Those cases haven't resonated in the way that Brittany Griner's case, for example, and we're all very glad she's home, resonated. And one of the reasons we wanted to write this book was to kind of show people that, look, this is something that's happening. It's happening to Americans like you and me. There was Mark Fogel, a teacher. This is a much deeper problem than most Americans realize.
I think certainly an Evan fitted into that higher profile category because he was the first journalist to be arrested on those kind of charges since the Cold War. But one of the things I think that the book reveals, and what's so worrying, is that this practice is very effective because it reveals the asymmetries in our system.
Talk about that.
Putin, doesn't really have to worry if a Russian spy is put into jail in America or in the UK because he knows that person will wait it out. It's part of their mission. And there's no public pressure on him in order to do a deal. With us, it's a free society. People can campaign, people can lobby, people can advocate, and it puts pressure on the government. Plus, the whole essence of the West is that we put the value on human life. But what is the cost of trading that life? By trading, do you encourage more of the practice? And by trading, is there a moral hazard where Putin or other autocrats who are, responsible for this practice are making you constantly push through different moral thresholds? You trade an arms dealer for a basketball player, you trade a killer, ultimately, in the trade of 26. And it's very effective and it's very precise, and I think the targets are very carefully chosen and calculated.
Joe Parkinson, Drew Henshaw, I told you folks I read 14 pages. I'm going to read all the rest. It's that good. It's been a pleasure. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You can watch our entire conversation on the CBS News YouTube page, and you can listen to it on your favorite podcast platform. That's it for the Takeout today. Please stick around. The Daily Report starts right now.